I trusted my wife completely after 15 years of marriage. That was my greatest mistake. A routine doctor's visit revealed something that shattered my world, and it all led back to my own brother's wedding. What I discovered next wasn't just betrayal, it was biological warfare. Some men forgive and forget. I chose total destruction. My name is Garry Doyle. I'm 45 years old, and I've spent the better part of 2 decades building what I thought was an unshakable life. I run a fencing and barrier installation business here in Tennessee. I started small, just me and a pickup truck, but over the years, I built it into something solid. We do everything from residential privacy fences to major commercial security barriers for government buildings. It's honest work, it pays well, and it gave me the stability to support my family. I met Lee when I was 25 and she was 22. She worked at the local bank where I'd go to deposit the business's earnings. Lee had this way about her, confident, sharp as a tack with numbers, and she could make you feel like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 3 years before I proposed, and those were some of the best years of my life. Our wedding was everything we wanted: simple, family focused, held at the old country church where my parents had been married. Lee was stunning in her grandmother's dress, and when she walked down that aisle, I knew I was the luckiest man on earth. My brother, Quentin, was my best man. He gave a speech about how Lee was perfect for me, how she balanced out my rougher edges. Everyone laughed, but he was right. The early years of our marriage were good to us. Lee kept working at the bank while I grew the business. We bought a house on 5 acres just outside of town. Nothing fancy, but it was well built, with plenty of room for the family we planned to have. When Piper was born 10 years ago, everything felt complete. Piper was our miracle baby. We'd been trying for a while, and when Lee finally got pregnant, we were over the moon. She's got her mother's brains and her father's stubborn streak, which makes for an interesting combination. At 10, she's already showing signs of being smarter than both of us put together. For 15 years, I thought I had it all figured out: a successful business that was steadily growing, a beautiful wife who managed our finances and kept me grounded, and a daughter who was the light of my life. We had family dinners on Sundays, went camping every summer, and Lee never missed one of Piper's school plays or soccer games. I worked hard, sometimes 60-hour weeks during the busy seasons, but I always made time for my family. Lee understood the demands of running a business. She supported me through the lean times and celebrated with me during the good ones. When I landed the contract to install security fencing around the new federal courthouse, she was the one who insisted we celebrate with a weekend getaway. There was never an issue of trust between us. Why would there be? Lee was dependable, caring, and completely woven into the fabric of our community. She knew everyone, volunteered at Piper's school, and had a reputation as one of the most honest people you could ever meet. If someone had told me a year ago that she was capable of betrayal, I would have laughed in their face. But that's the thing about betrayal. It comes from the people you'd never suspect, the ones who know exactly how to hurt you because you've shown them all your vulnerabilities. The thing about family is, you expect them to have your back, no matter what. My brother Quentin and I were like that, thick as thieves since we were kids. He's 2 years younger than me. He chose to be a high school history teacher and football coach. He has an easy way with people that I've always envied. When Quentin started dating Rebecca 5 years ago, our family was ecstatic. Rebecca is a nurse at the county hospital, and she brought out the best in my brother. They were perfect together. She's organized. He's a slob. She's practical. He's a dreamer. Their engagement last year came as no surprise. Quentin proposed to Rebecca during halftime at the homecoming game, right there on the 50-yard line. It was so him, big, public, and completely genuine. Rebecca cried, the crowd cheered, and even I got a lump in my throat. The wedding was set for late spring at the Riverside Chapel, a couple of hours north of the city. It's a beautiful old stone church overlooking the Tennessee River. Rebecca had dreamed of getting married there since she was a little girl. The plan was a Saturday afternoon ceremony with the reception in the historic hall next door. A month before the wedding, a major project landed on my desk that I couldn't turn down. The state needed new security barriers around a correctional facility and was looking for someone who could handle the technical requirements of specialized fencing. It was a six-figure contract, but it came with a tight deadline. When I told Lee about the conflict, she was completely understanding. Gary, this is exactly the kind of opportunity we've been working for. Quentin will understand. I talked to my brother about it, and he was supportive. Man, you can't turn down that kind of money. Lee will be there to represent our side of the family. So, we made the arrangements. Lee would drive up on Friday afternoon, attend the rehearsal dinner, stay for the wedding and reception, and then head back Sunday morning. Piper was going to spend the weekend at her friend Emma's house. The week leading up to the wedding was a blur of preparations for the prison project. Lee handled all the last-minute wedding details. She picked out our gift and even had her dress altered. She seemed excited for the weekend, talking about catching up with family. On Friday morning, I helped Lee load her suitcase into the SUV. She looked beautiful in a sundress, her hair done just the way I liked it. She gave me a long kiss goodbye. I'll miss you, she said, but I'll take lots of pictures. I remember standing in the driveway, watching her drive away, thinking how lucky I was to have a wife who supported my work and understood family obligations. If someone had told me that weekend would mark the beginning of the end, I would have called them crazy. That weekend, while Lee was at Quentin's wedding, I dove headfirst into the prison project. When you're installing security fences around a correctional facility, there's no room for error. Every measurement has to be precise. Every anchor point stress tested. I was on the job site at 6 a.m. Saturday, coffee in hand, with my crew already assembled. There was Marcos, my lead installer, who'd been with me for 8 years, and Jake, a younger guy with a sharp eye for detail. The prison administration had given us a tight security window. The warden, a stern woman named Ellen Torres, walked the perimeter with me that first morning. Mr. Doyle, she said, we reviewed your company's work on other government projects. That's why you won this contract. But any breach in our security timeline puts lives at risk. I looked her straight in the eye. Ma'am, when Doyle Fencing gives its word, you can count on it. This barrier will be installed correctly and on time. We pulled 16-hour days that weekend. The specialized anti-climb fencing required specific techniques I'd learned from military contractors. Each panel had to be perfectly aligned, with razor wire installed at precise angles. On Saturday night, around 8 o'clock, Lee called me while I was reviewing blueprints in my truck. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice bright. "The wedding was absolutely beautiful. Rebecca looked stunning, and Quentin cried during his vows." "That sounds like my little brother," I said, smiling despite my exhaustion. "How's the reception going?" "Oh, it's wonderful. The band is great, and I've already danced with your Uncle Frank and Cousin Tom. Everyone is asking about you." "Tell them I'll make it up to them at the next family reunion," I said. "Are you having a good time?" "A blast," Lee replied. "I love seeing everyone, and Rebecca's college friends are so much fun. A whole group of her old sorority sisters. We talked for maybe 10 minutes before she had to get back to the party. She sounded genuinely happy, and I felt good about the decision to let her enjoy the celebration while I handled business. By Sunday morning, my crew and I had finished installing the final gate and run a full security test. Everything worked perfectly. Warden Torres personally inspected our work. "Exceptional job, Mr. Doyle," she said, giving me a firm handshake. "This is exactly what we needed, delivered exactly when we needed it." That handshake meant everything to me. Government contracts are built on reputation, and word travels fast in the security installation community. This job would open doors I'd been working toward for years. I called Lee around noon to let her know I was wrapping up. She said she'd had brunch with the family and was getting ready to head home. "I can't wait to see you," she said. "I missed you more than I expected." The drive home gave me time to think about the future. This prison contract would likely lead to more government work, maybe even federal projects. I was building something that would provide for my family for decades to come. Lee pulled into our driveway about 20 minutes after I got home. I was in the garage, cleaning tools and putting away equipment from the job. When I heard the SUV, I went out to meet her. She looked tired but content as she stepped out of the car, wearing the same sundress she'd left in, though her hair was a little messier from the drive. "Hey, handsome," she said, stepping into my arms for a hug. "How was the wedding?" "I want to hear everything," I said, grabbing her suitcase. We went inside, and I poured us both an iced tea as she settled onto the couch. Lee kicked off her shoes and curled her legs up under her, looking completely at ease. "Tell me all about the reception," I said, sitting beside her. "Oh, God, it was so much fun," she said. "The food was incredible. Rebecca's family can really cook. And the band was a local group that played everything from classic rock to current hits." "Did you dance with Uncle Frank?" I asked, already knowing my uncle's reputation for never missing a chance to show off his moves. Lee laughed. "Of course. He's still got it at 72. And your cousin Tom tried to teach me some line dance he learned at his daughter's wedding." She told me about catching up with relatives, talking with Rebecca's college friends who had apparently treated her like one of their own, and about the emotional toast Quentin made. "I took about 100 pictures," she said, pulling out her phone. "Rebecca said it was okay to share them with you." Since I couldn't be there, we spent the next hour looking through photos. Images from the ceremony, the reception, pictures of family I hadn't seen in months. Lee looked happy in every single one. "I'm proud of you for going and representing us so well," I said. "And I'm proud of Quentin and Rebecca." Later that night, we ordered a pizza since neither of us felt like cooking. We watched a movie on the couch, with Lee curled up against my side, just like she always did. When we went to bed that night, Lee was affectionate and loving. We made love with the tenderness of two people who had missed each other. Afterward, she fell asleep in my arms, same as always. Lying there in the dark, listening to her steady breathing, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life we had built together. The prison project was done and had been a success. Quentin was happily married, and my own marriage felt solid as a rock. I had no way of knowing that everything Lee told me about the weekend was true, except for the most important part. Things happened at that wedding that would eventually destroy everything I thought I knew about the woman sleeping beside me. 3 weeks after the wedding, life seemed normal. I was busy with follow-up contracts from the prison job, and Lee was back in her usual routine at the bank. Piper was doing well in school, and everything felt exactly as it should be. Then I started feeling off. At first, I thought I was just run down. Running a business takes a toll on you, and the prison project had been physically demanding. But as the days went on, the symptoms got worse. I felt unwell in ways I couldn't quite explain, and my body just wasn't reacting the way it usually did. Being a man who believes in tackling problems head on, I initially tried to push through it. Maybe I needed more sleep, more vitamins, less coffee. I adjusted my diet, went to bed earlier, even took a few days off from the heavier jobs. Nothing worked. The way she said it, with such genuine concern in her voice, made me reconsider. This was my wife, worrying about me. She wanted to make sure I was healthy for our family. How could I argue with that? I made an appointment with Dr. Patterson, our family physician who had been looking after us for years. I figured he'd tell me I was working too hard, that I needed to slow down a bit. The appointment was for Thursday afternoon. I drove to the office thinking I'd probably walk out with a recommendation for vitamins and more rest. Dr. Patterson examined me carefully, asking detailed questions about the symptoms, when they started, and what might have triggered them. He was professional, but thorough, the way good doctors are when they're trying to figure out what's wrong. "Gary," he said after the exam, his expression serious, "I'm going to order some tests. Based on what you're describing and what I'm seeing, we need to rule a few things out." "What kind of things?" I asked. "It could be stress-related, a vitamin deficiency, or possibly an infection. The tests will help us determine the cause and the best course of treatment." He drew some blood and sent me down to the lab for more tests. "We'll have the results in a few days," Dr. Patterson said. "Try not to worry too much. Most of these things are easily treated once we know what we're dealing with." I left the office feeling somewhat relieved. Whatever it was, we would figure it out and fix it. That's how you solve problems. You face them head on and take the appropriate steps. When I got home, Lee asked how the appointment went. "Dr. Patterson is running some tests," I told her. "He thinks it could be stress or maybe an infection. Nothing serious." "Oh, good," she said, hugging me. "I'm glad you went. Taking care of yourself is taking care of us." Looking back, I realize that was one of the last completely honest conversations we ever had. On Friday afternoon, Dr. Patterson called while I was reviewing blueprints for a residential project. "Garrett, can you come in this afternoon? I have your results, and I'd like to discuss them with you in person." Something in his tone sent a knot of ice into my stomach. Doctors don't ask you to come in just to give you good news. I drove to the clinic with a rising sense of dread. The waiting room felt different this time, quieter, more somber. When the nurse called my name, I followed her to Dr. Patterson's office with heavy steps. "Garrett, please have a seat," he said, closing the door behind us. "I need to talk to you about your test results." Dr. Patterson sat across from me, his gaze direct. The tests indicate you have chlamydia. It's a sexually transmitted infection, but it's completely treatable with antibiotics. I stared at him for a long moment, certain I had misheard. That's impossible, I said. There has to be a mistake with the test. I understand. This is a shock, Dr. Patterson replied gently, but the test is conclusive. Chlamydia is one of the most common STIs, and it's easily cleared up with the right treatment. Doctor, you don't understand, I said, my voice rising. I've only ever been with my wife. I don't mess around. There is no way I could have this. Dr. Patterson nodded with empathy. Garrett, I've been your doctor for 8 years. I believe you're a faithful husband. But chlamydia doesn't just appear out of thin air. It's transmitted through sexual contact. The room seemed to tilt. Are you saying someone gave this to me? I'm saying that's how the infection is spread, he answered carefully. I can't speculate on specific circumstances, but I can tell you that both you and Lee will need to be treated. Lee. The name came out as a hoarse whisper. Yes, if you have chlamydia, she needs to be tested and treated as well. It's standard protocol for sexually transmitted infections. I sat there, trying to process what he was telling me. My wife of 15 years, the mother of my daughter, the woman I trusted completely, needed treatment for an STI that I had somehow contracted. What if she doesn't have it? I asked, a desperate hope flickering within me. Dr. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Garrett, given that you've been monogamous and were recently infected, it's highly probable that Lee is also infected. The timing of the infection suggests a recent exposure for you both. The implications landed like a fist in my gut. If I had chlamydia, and I had only been with Lee, then she either gave it to me or there was no other way. I hadn't been with anyone else. I need you to understand, Dr. Patterson continued, his voice steady. This is a medical issue that needs to be addressed. I'm going to prescribe you antibiotics, and I'd strongly recommend that Lee comes in to be tested and treated as well. I took the prescription with numb fingers. How long is the treatment? About a week with the antibiotics I'm prescribing. You'll need to avoid any sexual contact until you've both completed the full course. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing, scrambling for any explanation that didn't involve my wife's betrayal. Maybe there was some obscure medical reason I didn't know about. Maybe the test was wrong, despite Dr. Patterson's confidence. But deep down, a cold, hard truth was already settling in my bones. The woman I trusted with my life had given me a sexually transmitted disease. The only question was when, where, and with whom. My marriage, my family, my entire understanding of my life had just been shattered by a simple lab result. I sat in my truck in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the bottle of pills, trying to figure out how to handle this. A man protects his family. But what do you do when the threat comes from inside your own home? Finally, I walked through the front door, just like any other day. Lee was in the kitchen starting dinner, and Piper was at the table doing her homework. Everything looked normal, peaceful, exactly like the life I thought I had. Hey, honey, Lee said, smiling at me. How did it go? I looked at my daughter, then back at my wife. Piper, why don't you go finish your homework upstairs? Your mother and I need to talk. Piper glanced between us, sensing the sudden tension. Is everything okay, Dad? Everything's fine, sweetie. Just head upstairs for a few minutes. After Piper left, I closed the kitchen door and faced my wife. Lee was still standing by the stove, but her smile had vanished. Lee, I need you to sit down. She moved to the table, her hands clasped in front of her. Garrett, you're scaring me. What did Dr. Patterson say? The words hung in the air between us, like a dare. Lee looked back at me, her eyes wide with something that might have been fear. You're not serious, she whispered. I'm dead serious, I replied. So start talking. Lee collapsed into the chair, as if all strength had left her body. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed for what felt like an eternity. I didn't comfort her. I said nothing. I just stood there, waiting, because a man deserves the truth from his wife, and I wasn't leaving until I got it. Finally, she lifted her face, her eyes red and swollen. It was at the wedding, she said softly. My heart began to pound, but I kept my voice steady. What happened at the wedding? There was this guy there, someone Rebecca knew from college. We started talking during the reception, and we had too much to drink, and we ended up in his hotel room. She started crying harder. It was stupid, Garrett. I was drunk, and I wasn't thinking clearly. It just happened. I felt as if someone had swung a sledgehammer into my chest. Hearing her actually say the words was so much worse than just suspecting. It just happened? I repeated, my voice dripping with ice. You just accidentally fell into another man's bed? That's not what I meant, she said, desperate now. I mean, I made a terrible mistake. I was drunk and confused, and I did something I'll regret for the rest of my life. How long? I asked. What? How long were you with him? Lee dropped her gaze to the table. Most of the night. Most of the night. While I was at home missing her, she was in a stranger's hotel room, giving herself to another man. Did you use protection? I asked. She shook her head, never looking up. So you cheated on me, had unprotected sex with a stranger, and then you came home and made love to me without saying a single word. Garrett, please, answer me, I said firmly. Is that what happened? Yes, she whispered. I walked to the window and stared out at our backyard, at the life we had built together. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. Who was he? I asked, without turning around. Just some guy Rebecca knew. I don't even remember his last name. You destroyed our marriage for someone whose name you can't even remember. I didn't want to destroy anything, she said, her voice pleading. I hoped you would never have to know. I turned to face her. You hoped I'd never find out you gave me a sexually transmitted disease. I didn't know I was sick, she cried. I didn't have any symptoms. That doesn't make it better, Lee. That makes it so much worse. She stood and tried to move toward me, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. Just don't. Garrett, please, we can get through this. It was a mistake. One night that meant nothing. One night that meant everything, I corrected her. One night that ended our marriage. The look on her face told me she was finally starting to understand how serious this was. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, I said. Tomorrow, we are both going to Dr. Patterson to get treated, and then we're going to figure out what happens next. As I walked up the stairs, Lee called after me. Garrett, I love you. That has to count for something. I stopped and looked back down at her. If you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. And you sure as hell wouldn't have exposed me to a disease. The next morning, I called Dr. Patterson and made back-to-back appointments for Lee and me. She called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie. During the drive to the clinic, Lee tried to talk. Garrett, I know you're angry, but we have to think about Piper. She needs both her parents. Just keep your eyes on the road, I said coldly. Piper needs parents she can respect. And right now, I'm not sure she has that. At Dr. Patterson's office, we sat in separate chairs as he explained the treatment protocol. Lee would be tested to confirm the infection, then antibiotics for both of us. No physical contact until we were both completely clear. How long have you been having symptoms? Dr. Patterson asked me. I started feeling off about 3 weeks ago, I answered. He looked at Lee. And you, Mrs. Doyle? Me? She stammered. I I haven't had any symptoms, she admitted quietly. Dr. Patterson nodded. That's common with chlamydia in women. Many don't show symptoms initially. After we picked up our prescriptions, I drove Lee home in absolute silence. But my mind was already working, putting a plan into motion. A man doesn't just get angry, he gets even. That night, while I was putting Piper to bed, I started making calls. First, I called my lawyer, Tom Bradley, who had handled our business contracts for years. Tom, I need to discuss divorce proceedings, I said. Jesus, Garrett, what happened? Lee cheated on me and gave me an STD. I want her out of my house and out of my life. The house is in your name, right? Correct. That'll make things easier. Any kids? Yes, Piper. She's 10. We're going for full custody. Document everything. Next, I called my brother Quentin. This conversation would be harder. Quentin, I need to tell you something about your wedding weekend. I laid it all out. The chlamydia, Lee's confession, my plans for divorce. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before he spoke. Garrett, I am so sorry, he said finally. If I had known someone at my wedding would destroy yours. It's not your fault, I said, but I need your help. I need to find out who this guy was. Rebecca will know. They were college friends. I'll talk to Rebecca tonight. We'll get you answers. By the end of the week, Quentin called back with the information. His name is Derek Shue. He's married, lives in Nashville, works in marketing. Rebecca is horrified by what happened. Derek Shue, married. That piece of information changed everything. I hired a private investigator to find Derek's wife and get her contact information. If my marriage had been destroyed by this man's actions, his wife deserved to know who she was married to. A week later, I had all the details I needed. Derek Shue, 38, married to Linda Shue for 12 years, 2 children. He worked for a marketing firm in Nashville. I sat down and wrote a letter to Linda Shue. I included copies of the medical records, the timeline of events, and a detailed explanation of what her husband had done to my family. Mrs. Shue, I wrote, I am writing to inform you that your husband, Derek, had an affair with my wife during a wedding weekend 3 weeks ago. This affair resulted in my wife contracting chlamydia, which was then passed on to me. I thought you had a right to know the truth about your husband's actions. I mailed the letter with all the supporting documentation. 2 days later, my phone rang. Is this Garrett Doyle? A woman's voice asked. Yes, it is. Who's calling? This is Linda Shue. I received your letter. Linda and I spoke for over an hour. She thanked me for telling her the truth and confirmed that Derek had also given her chlamydia. She'd been wondering how she could have possibly contracted the infection. I'm filing for divorce, she told me. Derek can explain to our children why their father doesn't live here anymore. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said. No, Mr. Doyle. Thank you for having the courage to tell me. I deserve to know. 2 weeks later, Lee was served with divorce papers. I had them delivered to the bank where she worked, right in front of her colleagues. If she wanted to humiliate me, she could now feel a taste of it herself. That night, she came home, furious and crying. You had me served at work. Now everyone knows. Good, I said. Everyone should know what kind of person you are. Garrett, please. We can go to counseling. We can try to work this out. I just stared at her, the silence stretching between us. It was a mistake, she sobbed. A horrible, one-time mistake. No, I said, my voice flat and devoid of all emotion. It was a choice. You made your choice at that wedding. Now I'm making mine. There was nothing left to resolve. You chose to destroy our marriage, I said. Now, you have to live with the consequences. The custody battle was swift, with documented proof of her adultery and the health risks she had exposed our family to. The judge granted me primary custody of Piper. Lee would have supervised visits every other weekend. Why supervised? She asked her lawyer. My own lawyer explained the reasoning to me later. The judge told her plainly, you have demonstrated misconduct that could jeopardize the well-being of the child. The house was never in question, as it had belonged to my mother. Lee had no claim to it. She was given 30 days to find another place to live. During those 30 days, I explained everything to Piper in age-appropriate terms. Your mother made some poor decisions that hurt our family, I told her. Sometimes, when grown-ups make bad decisions, they have to face the consequences. But I'll still see Mommy? Piper asked, her voice small. Yes, sweetie, you'll still see her. But you'll be living here with me. Are you sad, Daddy? I'm disappointed, I answered honestly. But I'm not sad, because I still have you. And you are the most important person in my life. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from the lovely Shu. Derek moved out last week, she said. He's living with his brother, begging me to take him back. Are you going to? I asked. Not a chance. Some betrayals are unforgivable. 6 months later, my business was thriving. The prison contract had led to 3 more government projects, and the reputation of Doy fencing for quality and reliability was spreading. Piper was adjusting well to our new reality. She still saw Lee every other weekend, but she seemed happier and more secure living primarily with me. One evening, while doing her homework, Piper looked up and said, Daddy, I'm proud of you. Why, sweetie? Because you stood up for yourself. My teacher says that's what strong people do. As I tucked her in that night, I realized she was right. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to accept betrayal. I had demanded honesty. I had protected my family from further pain. My marriage was over, but my life was not. Sometimes, the strongest thing a man can do is walk away from someone who doesn't deserve his trust. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply refusing to let another person's treachery define your future.